Okay, we'll get started. In conclusion, what we covered last week, the first 11 things, the main point there was to understand, thank you, to understand that the Torah, the way we know it, is really only like a mushal compared to the real wisdom in Torah. In other words, the real infinite layers of wisdom in Torah. And what we know, and the way we see it, is like the most external layer. And that explains all the questions that were asked. Regarding the question, what does it say? The Torah is 2,000 years before the world was created? And the answer is, it doesn't mean 2,000 years in Zman. Yes, time itself is a creation. It means the Torah and the wisdom in Torah is 2,000 levels deeper and greater than the wisdom that's found in creation. And by the way, it's an interesting thing, even Rashi and Chumash says this. If anybody wants to look it up later, it's in Parsha Shlach. It's chapter 13, pasuk 22. And it says that they came to the city of Hebron, which was built 7 years. This is what it says in the Chumash. 7 years before a different city in Mitzrayim. And Rashi says, no, it couldn't have been built 7 years before, and shows the reason why. And Rashi explains, what does it mean it was built 7 years before? It means it was built 7 times as nice, as more beautiful as that in that city in Mitzrayim. In other words, we see that sometimes, even in Chumash and Pshat, when it says years, it means chronologically years, but sometimes it's a way of saying that it's much deeper, it's much greater, and so on. Okay, let's move on to another thing. And let's go to page 2. I'll go back soon, but let's go right now to page 2 in the beginning, from 25 to 32. So here there are a number of questions, thank you, that Chazal say. Number 25 is a quote from Gemara. The Gemara says, based on a pasuk, Zacha of Yidden, if a Yid merits, Nasis lo sam chayin. In other words, the Torah is compared to a drug. If we merit, then it's going to be a drug that's going to give life. If you don't merit, Nasis lo sam mavis, it becomes a drug that Rahman al takes away life, which on the surface is really shocking. We know that Torah is considered life and the source of life, and the Torah is our life. And here we're saying, okay, if a person doesn't learn Torah properly, it's not going to give him life, but to say that this is, God forbid, going to be like a drug that kills someone, how could you say that about the Torah? Another question is number 27, where it says, Chochma yesh bagoyim taimin. The non-Jews, someone will tell you that the non-Jews have wisdom, you could believe them. Torah yesh bagoyim al taimim. If someone tells you they have Torah, do not believe them. On the surface, that's also not understood, because Torah is wisdom. And if somebody is intelligent and smart, and they were very brilliant people in the non-Jewish world, why can't they have Torah as well? And they'll study Torah, they'll have Torah. The truth is, there's a prohibition for a non-Jew to study Torah. They're not allowed to. They're only allowed to study those halachas that apply to their 7 mitzvahs. But here it seems to be, it's not about that technically they can't study, but that the concept of Torah can't apply to them. Another question is number 28, where it says that the Beis Hamikdash The first one was destroyed. Shalei Baruch because they didn't make a bracha before they started learning. And that also seems to be shocking. Why is not making a bracha so severe? You know, there were times when Jews didn't learn Torah. Instead, they did other things. But if they were studying Torah and they just didn't make the bracha before, is that a reason to bring on such a catastrophe, like the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash? Anyway, the Nakuda, the answer to this is, again, this is a central point in Chassidus, in Tanya, in Maimarim, regarding Shavuos and regarding Torah in general. And that's really the answer to all these questions. And like I said, the reason why I'm bringing this up is because I wanted to be familiar with what are the discussions on Shavuos in the Maimarim and Sikhs and so on. And this is one of the central points. And that is, in addition to what we said before, that the Torah, the way we know it, and the wisdom in Torah is only an external outline of the real wisdom in Torah. And therefore the Torah is compared to a mashal. And there are infinite layers of depth of wisdom in Torah. After all that, there's another thing, and that is the wisdom in Torah itself is not the main thing. The main thing is that Hashem invested his infinite essence in the Torah. Wisdom is Chokhmah. And Chokhmah, as great as it is, even if it's a Chokhmah of Hashem, but still something which is limited. Chokhmah, something specific. Hashem is Ein Sof, is infinite. He's the one who created Chokhmah. So Hashem invested his infinite light in the words of Torah. And that's the main reason why we should be passionate about learning Torah. And what we accomplish when we learn Torah is that when we study Torah, that's our way of becoming one with the essence of Hashem, with Ein Sof. This is something explained at length in Tanya, in Maimarim, but it's also based on something which is found in Gemara. Look at number 32. In Gemara, it says that the word Anochi which is the first word of the Aseres Adivros, and we know that the first word is the most essential, because that's the beginning. Just like we say Rosh Hashanah is the beginning of the whole year. Whatever happens the whole year depends on Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Chodesh is the beginning of the month. Or the same thing with the person on a personal level, where the Rebbe tells us to be very cautious and to add a lot on the day of a birthday, because it's the beginning of my personal year. But we find this also in many other areas, like in Torah. The first word of the parsha is usually the name of the parsha, and that usually includes the entire parsha. Like this week, the first word is Nosei, and that word, because it's in the beginning, it really includes everything that's going to come later. So the first letter, by the way, I know this came up in the Chinuch class, one of the big controversies between the Torah way of educating children and the modern way of educating children, which came from the assimilated, enlightened Jews, was instead of teaching children vowels, kamas, pata, tere, shego, first you teach them the letters, aleph, beis, gimel, dalet. Then you teach them the vowels, and then you show them how to connect the letters with the vowels. And you teach them kamas, aleph, oh. The modern assimilated way, well, why waste your time? Why don't you teach them like in other languages? Just teach them the letter with the vowel together. And they'll learn how to, instead of saying first learn an aleph, then learn about the vowels, then learn how to connect the two. There's a lot of deep inyanim involved here, but there's a sikha from the Frierdiker Rebbe that when you teach a child properly and you teach them to say kamas, aleph, oh, you're connecting them to the of the first letter of the first word of the first of the 10 commandments, which is Anochi. And you're planting that kamas aleph in their mind and in their hearts. And that, in their entire life, will be the seed that will give them emunah and connection to Hashem. If Chas v'Shalom skip that stage, then they're going to be lacking this. And as we see, all these children who unfortunately were educated in the other systems, what happened? They all assimilated Rahman al-Islam. So the first word of the Aseret Sedubris is Anochi is an acronym. If you look at 32, Ana is Aleph, Nafshi is Nun, Ksavis is Chaf, Yehovis is Yud, Anochi. And it means I wrote myself up in the Torah. So this is really the essence of what Torah is about. And it's all about not intellect. Now, is it possible for a person to be passionate about learning and learn Torah day and night and not waste a minute? But the passion and the pleasure and the enjoyment and the excitement is more about the intellectual aspect of the Torah. Just like lahavdil, a person who is passionate about science and medicine and history and any other field of wisdom. And yes, of course it's possible. On the contrary, dafka, because it's so deep and it's so pleasant and it's so it's really the most truthful thing that exists in the world. Therefore, you can get distracted and be passionate about the wisdom of the Torah and the intellect of Torah, rather than the fact that through this I'm connecting to Hashem's essence. So just to go through what this means when it says Chokhmah, if you say non-Jews have wisdom, they sure do. They were brilliant people. In fact, in the Gemara it says there was one of the sages, his name was Rabbi ben Levi. And he was unique. He was the only one that was able to debate religion with the Greek philosophers. And one says, and what happened after he passed? Who was the one who was able to do what he did? And the Gemara asks us, once he was no longer here, there was nobody amongst the Greeks that were as smart as he was. So Chochmah yesh b'goyim timing. But Torah was a difference. Of course, Torah is wisdom, but Torah is much more than wisdom. It's Ein Sof that Hashem invested in the Torah. And that is only something which is given to Yidden. And because we have an Neshama and Nefesh Elokis, so therefore when we study Torah, we can connect to the infinite light of Hashem that's in Torah. Anybody else that studies Torah could know Torah, could be extremely knowledgeable, could have vast knowledge of the whole Torah like any other person because they're intelligent, but they'll be connected to the wisdom in Torah, not to the essence, which is the Ein Sof in Torah. Yeah.
We have what? And that's what connects us to the essence we have.
In Torah, the Hashem's Ein Sof is infinite light. And we absorb that by learning Torah. But anyone else that learns Torah can connect to the wisdom in Torah, the intellect in Torah, but not to that Ein Sof that's in Torah. And this is the deeper meaning of number 28. That the reason why the Beis Mikdash was destroyed was because they didn't make the bracha before. They just want to show you. Let's look at the bracha. We all know it because we say it every single day. But now we'll pay a little bit more attention to what we're saying. Look at page 50. In the Shulchan Aruch, there's one of the commentators is called the Bach, and he makes reference to this Gemara that it was destroyed because they didn't make a bracha. So he says the following. Look at the bracha; it's underlined on page 50. Blessed are you, Hashem, that you chose us from all the nations and you gave us your Torah. Thank you, Hashem. Listen, I tell you, the one who gives the Torah. So this famous commentator on Shulchan Aruch writes that because they didn't make the bracha, that means they weren't paying attention to, they were paying attention to Torah, but not to Nosein HaTorah. See these two words? Nosein HaTorah, to the giver of the Torah. Which means the passion for Torah should be that through this we're connecting to the giver of Torah, not just to the wisdom of Torah. And in fact, the smarter someone is and the more passionate someone is about learning, the more likely we can lose ourselves and get distracted and be passionate about that part of Torah more than the inner part of Torah. And what's so terrible about that? And the answer is because Torah is something very powerful. And unfortunately, if a person studies Torah not because of the godliness in it, because the Ein Sof in it, just because of the brilliance and the wisdom, that could that could have the opposite effect on a person. That could feed their ego. I think it would be overstatement to say that most people that are very successful education-wise, and people who are professors and brilliant people in the colleges are very arrogant people. That's the way it is. A lot of students in college will tell you that their teachers, their professors are very arrogant, they're hardly approachable. And why is it? Because when someone's very successful, it makes you arrogant. When you're successful with a lot of money, you become arrogant. Successful with a lot of wisdom, you also become arrogant. How is it possible that when you study Torah, the more you study, you become more humble? Because when you're studying Torah for the right reasons, which means to connect to Hashem, the closer you are to Hashem, the more you're humble. When you study Torah and you're focusing on the wisdom in Torah, then the more you have, the more it feeds the ego. And unfortunately, what happened in history was that people like that, because they were so knowledgeable, because they were so brilliant, and they had so much knowledge of Torah, they started to see themselves as some sort of an authority, and they used the Torah and twisted and turned things and distorted things in a way that would justify whatever it is what they wanted to do. And I've mentioned this many times that a lot of the greatest tragedies in history, biggest tragedies in history, which came from Jews themselves, were dafka, very learned Jews. Starting from the first one, which is Yerovim ben Nevat, one who split the Jews into two camps, two kingdoms. The Gemara says that all the Torah scholars in his generation, and that was his generation in times of right after Shlomo Melech, all the Torah scholars of his generation compared to him was like a blade of grass. That's how much they were great. He was greater than everyone in Torah. And yet, look what he did. And the Gemara says, because the Torah he studied made him arrogant. And the same thing with reform that we have today, which also brought assimilation of millions of Jews in the last 200 years, it was started by someone who lived in Germany, and he was very intelligent, and he wanted everybody else to also have the merit of being educated in colleges, universities, and be like everybody else. But he was a source of assimilation. He introduced the reform movement, and unfortunately, his children converted, all his sons converted to Christianity. And unfortunately, all the Jews who followed his path are the ones that assimilated eventually. What about he himself? He himself was a Torah scholar. He wrote a commentary on Torah. Even though he was from officially, he davened and he put on tefillin, but he had distorted ideas about Yiddishkeit. And like I said, he was a Torah scholar. And on the contrary, because he was a Torah scholar, he gave himself the liberty to make certain ideas, and he understands this and he understands that. And eventually, this was what it says here, that if you learn Torah the wrong way, it could become a drug that takes away life. I once saw I think you heard this from me more than once, but I'll repeat it again because it's very relevant to the subject. A sefer that the person in his introduction to his Torah book raises a question, which is a contradiction. In one place it says, if Hashem wouldn't give us assistance, we'd never be able to overcome the Yetzer Hara because it's so strong. In another place it says, Hashem says, Barasi Yetzer Hara, Barasi Torah Tavlin. I created a Yetzer Hara, but I also created something that neutralizes the Yetzer Hara, which is Torah. So what's the contradiction? Here it says that Torah helps you overcome the Yetzer Hara. Here it says that Hashem helps you overcome the Yetzer Hara. That was the question. Every time I taught a class, even in high school, remember Besrifka used to teach 13-year-olds, 14-year-olds, they all didn't understand the question. The answer is even better than the question. The answer is that if you are not a Torah scholar, then you need Hashem's assistance. But if you are a Torah scholar, you don't need Hashem's assistance because you have Torah. Where does such a concept come from? Without realizing that Torah is Hashem. The second thing on this list is a quote from Zohar: Yisrael, Eraisa, V'Kudsha B'Richu, Kol Echad. Hashem, the Torah, and Yidden are all one. Torah and Hashem are one. So when we say the Torah will give you assistance, Hashem will give you assistance, it's all the same. I once saw, I'm going to finish with this and we'll move on. But I once saw a write-up where people wrote about their Rosh Hashiva, about his greatness. He did this, he said that, he did this. Interesting stories. One story, I couldn't believe that I was actually reading it. I read it a few times to make sure that I understood what I'm reading. To bring out his greatness in Torah, they tell the following story. That his students were sitting in his class, and he used to keep his yarmulke in his pocket. And wear a hat, of course. And when he took off his hat, he put on the yarmulke. One time he started his class, took off his hat, and he forgot to put on the kippah. So he was giving the class, and his head is bare. The students are looking, and smiling, and smirking, and he noticed. He said to them, "What is going on? Why is everybody smirking and smiling?" They were embarrassed to say. Finally, one of the students said, "The rabbi is not wearing his yarmulke." So he said to them, "And that's what's in your mind when we're giving over a deep Torah discourse? What kind of students are these?" And they write this as to describe his greatness, that he was so immersed in Torah study that he didn't even realize that he wasn't wearing a yarmulke.
Wait, the joke?
No, it's not a joke. Unfortunately, it was very serious. They're writing a whole list of amazing things that he did, amazing things that he said, and this is one of them.
Who's writing?
His students.
Oh, because the students like them.
I'm saying the students' understanding was that this indicates a tremendous quality, how a person so passionate about Torah that he even doesn't realize that he's not wearing a yarmulke.
So off.
It's off. Why is it off? Because again, there's a separation between the fact that Torah is godly and the Torah is wisdom.
I'm trying to, so him saying that this is not a good thing.
Yeah, lighting up.
Right? I'm,
Right.
yeah, okay, because that's it. Okay.
Yeah.
Horrible.
Okay, so this is another subject which is at the center of all the Maimorim and Sichos and by all the Rabbeim is this Nakuda that Torah is Ein Sof, and Hashem's infinite light is invested in the Torah, and through the learning, through that we connect to Hashem, and that's really the essence of Torah. That's why we're passionate about Torah, and of course we're passionate about the wisdom, but because it's Hashem's wisdom. And that's what it means to learn Torah, the Shema, for the right reasons. To learn Torah in order to connect to Hashem, to become one with Hashem. Okay, now another point, which is a main point in Chassidus, is number 12, and going back to number 12. Many Maimorim begin with this question, and that is, our sages tell us that Avraham Avinu, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, who were Nevi'im, they were prophets, they observed the entire Torah. Certainly things they did it differently than we did it, but basically they kept Shabbos, they kept all the holidays, Pesach, Shavuos, even though it was before different things happened, but they were Nevi'im, they knew that in the future this would be part of Torah, and they observed it as well. So the question is, if they observed the Torah, and that means the Torah already existed before. It says the Torah would never cease to exist from Avraham Avinu. Even before that, you know the story with Yaakov and Esau. Before they were born, their mother Rivka went to ask, "How come she's having this difficulty?" And they told her, "You're having twins, right?" Who did she go to? Do you remember?
Shane Baber.
And who was Shem Weber?
students.
They were the Rosh Yeshivas at that time. They had a yeshiva. That's what it says. They were the ones who were teaching Torah. So there was Torah by Shem Ba'aver, Torah by Avraham, Yitzhak, Yaakov. What is the big commotion that the Torah was given to Har Sinai? You might say the difference is, that was just individuals, selected people. Har Sinai was for everybody. So the difference is just quantity. So the main answer in Chassidus, and all the Maimonic Chassidus are revolved around this, is based on a pasuk in Shir HaShirim. Let's look at that pasuk, page 35. Page 35 is where it says these words. The Reach Shmonecha Tovim, like the scent of good oils, Shemen Turak Shmecha, Alkein Alamaz Ahevucha. This is again describing the love of Hashem to the Yidden, Yidden to Hashem. So it says two things here. I know the English translation is probably based on something else, but the literal translation is the scent of your oils and your perfumes are very good, and your name is like pouring oil or perfume. So the Gemara says, this is in Gemara. What is the difference, or Medrash? What is the difference between the Torah that was studied before the Torah was given and after the Torah was given? The Torah before Har Sinai was like the scent of the oils. After Har Sinai, it was like taking oil from one cup and pouring it to another cup. So the way Chassidus explains it is, first of all, the difference between the scent and pouring oil is you have the scent of something very good in the room. After a while, it fades away. It's not permanent. But if I take a liquid and I pour it from one cup to the next, it'll be sitting in that cup in a very long time. The scent fades away, but the actual substance of the oil or perfume or whatever it is will stay all the time. What does that mean? That when the others observed Torah mitzvahs, they also brought godliness down to this world, but the godliness that they brought down to this world faded away, which means it did not penetrate and become part of the physical world. This will be compared to the sun. Right now, it's light outside because the sun is shining. However, once the sun goes down after sundown, everything goes dark. But why? For so many hours the sunlight was here, why doesn't the light remain? And the answer is because the sunlight doesn't change the room, doesn't change the substance. The sunlight is shining here, and therefore as soon as it leaves, everything goes back to the way it was before. When a teacher teaches a student and gives them a new insight, a concept, the teacher walks away and the student retains that information. But when the sun shines in a room, the room retains nothing. It's only light because the sun is shining. And as soon as that's so, let's say, for example, Avraham Avinu, he did a mitzvah. At that moment, Hashem's light was shining in the world. Once he stopped, then that light went back, was gone. The world was never changed. After the Torah was given, the world became a changed world. That is the that is the main thing. So number 13, that's the quote from the pasuk. The Reach Shmonecha Tovim, the scent of your oil is good. Number 14 is the words from Gemara. Reicha is hayu. Their mitzvahs were like scent, meaning that it's not permanent. So in the Sichos, it's based on these words. Again, you'll hear this, you'll see this a lot. El yonim lo yerdu lamata, v'tachtonim lo yalu l'mayla. Maybe first, number 16. Number 16 is a pasuk. It's in Hallow. Hashemayim shemayim Hashem. The heavens are heavens to Hashem. It's not son of any other. And the earth it gave to humans. Yeah.
If their mitzvahs are so impermanent, what made them to receive the Torah? Was it just a time thing? Because they were not building up on, they weren't like accumulating.
No. So the answer is, even though it didn't penetrate, but the fact that they brought, in that sense, you would say the mashal is not accurate, the fact that they constantly brought this light of Hashem into the world, that prepared the world that they were able to eventually absorb the godly light in a permanent way. I would compare it to a different mashal. If you ever observed the way a mother talks to a 2-year-old, as if he knows what he's talking about. She explains them what I'm doing and why I'm doing it, and now we're going to do this, and now we're going to do that. He doesn't really understand. He might repeat words, but he doesn't really get it. So what's the point in talking to a child and explaining things? Why don't you wait till he becomes an adult, and then you'll start talking to him? Chas v'shalom. He'd be delayed. So in other words, when you talk to a child, even though it bounces off, he doesn't really get what you're saying. He doesn't understand what you're explaining. But everything you say, even though it's sort of makif, it's external, but it slowly prepares the child that eventually, as his brain develops, he'll be able to absorb it. So the same thing here. Avraham Avinu brought godliness down to the world, even though it wasn't permanent, but it had a certain impact on refining the world. And Yitzchak had another impact, and Yaakov, and so on. And finally, when it came to Moshe, after all these 6 generations of bringing godliness into the world was ready internally.
Was it permanent on them? Like they couldn't impact the world in a permanent way, but when they learned, was it permanent for them?
It was permanent for them, probably. And they were also, Hasidus refers to it as a merkava, which means they never stopped serving Hashem for 1 second. Everything they did was constantly serving Hashem. So the mashal the Medrash uses is like comparing the Shemaim, the heavens, to Syria, and the earth is like Rome. And imagine be a decree that those from up there can come down, and those from down here can go up. That's how there was a decree that those that are in heaven can come down to earth. Earth can go up to heaven. And then, when the Torah was given, that decree was canceled. The barrier was away. And now earth merged, which means this is the essence of what Torah is all about. When the Torah was given, this allowed a merger that heaven and earth could become one. That through learning and through davening and through mitzvahs, the physical object is transformed. We don't see it, but in essence, we will see it when Mashiach comes. Every time a mitzvah is done, it transforms. The physical object becomes something different than it was before. Of course, we have stories of tzaddikim where they were able to look at something, like there's a story with the Rebbe Rashab and the Friedrich Rebbe. They're the ones traveling, and they passed a marketplace. And the Rebbe Rashab said to the Rebbe, you can tell that somebody or that people was daven mincha here. In other words, not only was he able to tell that there was some godly light in this spot, because someone did a mitzvah, he was able to tell which mitzvah it was davening, and he was able to tell which davening it was mincha. Just like walking, I guess it's like walking into the room and you say, somebody must have had pickles there. Wow, how did you figure that out? Did you see anything? No. Did you see them before? No. How did you know?
How do we know it's true?
My nose told me.
How do you know it's true?
That what?
That who really was davening for there?
How do we know? Well, the Rebbe Rashab said that he sensed it, he sees it. He sees that this was the change that took place in this spot. Yes.
I don't remember how many exactly, but was it by by Kriyas Yamsuf, wasn't there a certain amount of sparks that were already elevated, and ever since then we've been trying to like elevate the rest?
Right.
How could they elevate sparks if you couldn't penetrate the world with like godliness?
Good question.
It was elevated in a different way, I guess, before those sparks that were elevated before the Torah was given didn't need it, I guess. I'm not so knowledgeable in spark area, but I'm imagining that probably for Matan Torah it didn't need the same kind of avodah like we do now, because elevating sparks is through mitzvahs, and they didn't have any Torah mitzvahs altogether then. In fact, they elevated the sparks then mainly through their hard labor. It wasn't even through Torah mitzvahs. It was a whole different manner of elevating the sparks.
Rabbi,
Yeah,
I have a general question about with talk, I can save for after class.
I think so, because I just want to finish something. This explains another thing about Shavuos, where I made a copy of it so you can see the source here on page 6. There's a commentary on the side of the Gemara, which is called Rabbi Nissim Gaon. You notice it on page 6. And basically it goes into the fact that the Gemara says the Torah was given in the 3rd month. There's something about number 3 and Torah, and it gives a list. And who knows how many things that it's all 3. Just to give you an example. Torah is given to a nation that comes from 3, Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. The Torah is given to a person who comes from the 3rd tribe, Reuven, Shimon, and Levi. Moshe Rabbeinu was a Levi. Levi itself has 3 letters, Lamed, Vav, Yud. Moshe has 3 letters, Mem, Shin, Hey. How many months did his mother hide him before he could be found? She hid him for 3 months. The Torah is made up of 3 parts, which is Torah, Nevi'im, and Ksuvim. And there's another 3 parts, which is the Mishnah, the Gemara, and the Halacha. The davening is made up of 3 parts, Shachris, Mincha, and Ma'ariv. The Jewish people are made up of 3, Kohanim, Leviim, Israel, and it goes on and on and on. Everything related to Torah is related to the number 3. So based on what we said now, this is the explanation of why number 3. And that's what you see here on number 21, 22, and 23, and 24. This is all from Gemara. Yachid Lisai, the Torah is given in the 3rd month. Amat Lisai, to a nation that consists of 3, Kohanim, Leviim, Israelim. Araisif Lisai, were given a Torah which is made up of 3, Torah, Nevi'im, Aksuvim. Yomet Lisai was given after 3 days of preparation, and on the 3rd day they got the Torah. So basically, the connection to the number 3 is based on what we just now said. That's what Torah is all about. When Hashem created the world, there was 1. Before Hashem created the world, there was 1. Only Hashem. When Hashem created the world, there was now 2. Hashem and the world. But 2 separate things. What was the uniqueness about Matan Torah? Now Hashem and the world became 1. And that's the number 3. The number 3 is not that there's 3 things, like Tiferes, that there's a merger of 2 things and that becomes something new completely, where it's a result of 2 things that merge together.
So there's 3 votes, so there's 4 imamos.
They get their credit also.
Yeah, 4 is also special, or.
Yeah.
Okay.
Listen, 4, Yud-Kei Vav-Kei is 4.
Oh,
And so many things in Torah are connected with 4 because of that reason. Yeah.
Why are we saying there's like the 1 through the all 1?
That's what the 3 is.
Why are we not 1?
You remember the mimer that we learned and Shayichud that we learned, it's all about the word Echad. You remember we learned that to say that the Hashem is 1 and there is no creation, that's saying that Hashem is 1. When you say Hashem Echad, we're saying the fact that Hashem did create a world. There is 7 heavens and earth. There are north, south, west, east, which means there's a physical world with physical limitations. And nevertheless, Hashem and the world are absolutely 1, inseparable. So basically, that's what number 3 is. It doesn't mean that there are 3 different things. It's this point that there is 2, but really, in essence, it's all 1. And through us learning Torah and doing mitzvahs, we reveal that in the creation. I knew I should have started a few days earlier. I'm getting stuff already. That's it. Fine, we'll have to continue whatever we can tomorrow. Unless some teacher will be absent, then I'll fill it in over there. Okay, so everybody.
the story with the yeshiva,
Yeah,
so it's disturbing. So is it a regular normal yeshiva?
maybe the person who wrote the paper wasn't a regular normal person.
All the places with my friend, so strange. They're all like, they were all.
No, I'm saying the opposite. The fact that they were reacting that way, doesn't that mean that they didn't understand how you can do such a thing?
Oh,
It was the one who was teaching that said, is this what's on your mind when you're listening to a deep Torah?
and they all,
Discourse.
they didn't accept it, or they,
This person wrote it down, documenting this
That's
as a
good.
synonym of this person's greatness.
so off,
So that was all.
okay.
I'm still very confused about the sparks. How can you elevate something if you can't elevate something?
The truth is, we don't understand the whole concept of entering sparks in the first place. What do we do? How does it happen? We don't know the mechanics. So it's not so hard for me to understand that before the Torah was given, the way to elevate the spark was just a different way.
If nothing was permanent. So how would it even, how could we say we're building off of?
Nothing was permanent in terms of changing this world. But I guess it elevated the sparks and connected them to their source. Elevating the sparks really means to connect the spark to their source, to extract it and connect it to Hashem. So maybe then they extracted it, but it didn't have the effect of transforming the physical. A good question. Maybe there's an answer, but I don't remember seeing an answer.
Okay, I'm gonna make this my life mission.
In addition to all the other ones.
Yeah. Makes life way more fun. So the question I wanted to ask was so.
All right.
And you can say the one person party. What is what? What is the
I got their mamas and their clients, the water clients.
In other words, okay,
Mamas there, the time, but some things can have in, but some things is very, no, it's like, hey, people work so nice, then everybody go to live, hundreds, we're all there. And it's happening every year, in a spiritual level. But then you say, you want to get something practical, like. So maybe like someone meals, where you, I'm just trying to think of. I'm thinking about doing a short death, part of death, like a little piece, but I want to end it with something practical. Always the same day.
Here's something back to this, suggest. Basically.